Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO politics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a breaking news update for the 1st of May 2025. I am going to report to you, many of you will already know, that Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor for Trump, has gone his own way. Has he been sacked? Has he left his post? Who knows? But basically, Mike Waltz has gone. Trump's National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, to leave post weeks after Signal group chat scandal. So two people familiar with the matter have confirmed to The Guardian that Donald Trump's National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and his deputy, Alex Wong, will be leaving their posts. The confirmation comes weeks after Waltz found himself at the centre of a scandal involving his accidental adding of the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, into a Signal chat regarding US attack plans in Yemen. As The Guardian's Hugo Lauer reports, quote, the president briefly considered firing Waltz over the episode, but reportedly decided he was unwilling to give the news media the satisfaction of forcing the ouster of a top cabinet official weeks into his second term. Okay, let's put this into context. Essentially, this is my speculation here. Trump would have sacked Mike Waltz pretty much straight away after the whole Signalgate scandal if it wasn't, as is stated here, ammunition for what he would say the libs and the media against him. He didn't sack him because he didn't want to hand that to the media, didn't want to hand it to the libs. And that's why Mike Waltz stayed on until this point where actually now we can let him go and it won't be so obviously attached to the cock-up previously with the Signal group chat. But essentially, that's why he's going his separate way. I mean, it is interesting that he is somewhat supportive of Ukraine, although he's generally towed the party line in being harsh on Ukraine when I guess he deemed it, this is Mike Waltz, deemed it useful to be harsh on Ukraine when Trump was doing similarly. So I think he's fairly pro-Ukraine, but he's surrounded by people who clearly aren't, and that's tempered his sensible kind of national security instincts. Could that be a reason he's gone? I don't know. The messaging from the White House at the moment vis-a-vis Ukraine and Russia is all over the shop. One day it's like, oh, Putin is, pulling the wool over our eyes. He's not playing ball. It's a bit of an issue. And the next day is like, oh, I get on much better with Putin than I do with Zelensky. And, Putin really wants peace. And so flip-flops, Trump flip-flops all over the shop, while at the time allowing people like Marco Rubio to say, oh, the peace negotiations are going to be over unless we get something concrete. And then Keith Kellogg says, no, actually, we aren't going to walk away from peace negotiations. So, it's a bit of a hot mess. And so trying to work out whether Ukraine has anything to do with the sacking or with Mike Waltz leaving the job, it's a bit of an unknown as far as I'm concerned. But I would certainly say it's connected to the Signalgate scandal. And and we'll see this from another analyst in a second, CNN's Cillizza, if that's how you pronounce it. I would agree with him in saying that Pete Hegseth is probably the next one to go. So that has happened. What's that mean for Ukraine? Before we look at more generally at the turnover that Trump seems to be a big fan of, what does that say for Ukraine? I don't know. It really does depend who comes in next. Keith Kellogg in Trump 1.0 held onto National Security Advisor as a stopgap between one of the other 5 people who had the job. I mean, this is a position under Trump that is very, very, you're on shaky ground, essentially. If you're a National Security Advisor, you're going to be gone fairly soon, one way or another, I would suggest. If you think Jake Sullivan, was he not the National Security Advisor for Biden for the entirety of the Biden administration? We've already seen Mike Waltz go, and in Trump 1.0 there were 6 NSAs there. The National Security Advisor NSA is a bit different, isn't it? That has happened. Let's just read a little bit more Detail here, this is from The Guardian. White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz being forced out. Trump also shouted out his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, which is perhaps notable following the news that just broke that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has been forced out of his job, according to Reuters, citing 4 people briefed on the matter. One source familiar with the situation at National Security Council told CBC News that President thinks sufficient time has passed since the Signal debacle that Waltz and Wong's departures can be framed as part of a reorganisation. So exactly what I was just saying. Trump has been hesitant to oust Waltz, which he considered doing at the time, over the perception that doing so could be seen as bending to outside pressure. Meanwhile, Trump has continued to back Hegseth, who Democrats and a number of Republicans have called on to be fired for his repeated use of Signal to discuss sensitive military operations in Yemen. And Trump has had supportive words to say of Hegseth, but words that can also be a precursor to him being for the chopping block, such as, I think he called it childish, naive, and such like. So I think you can say goodbye to Hegseth at some point soon, because he's also someone that other Republicans have been pretty critical of, given the Signalgate scandal 2.0. So not only was Hegseth responsible for sharing that information with Jeffrey Goldberg in that first Signal chat group, it was Mike Waltz that started that group. Then we heard that Pete Hegseth had started a parallel group himself with his wife, his brother, and his personal lawyer on there. None of these uniformed individuals, and gave the same kind of information to them. And then he's had personal line tacked into his office so that he can use Signal and all this kind of carry on. Hegseth, I think, will be on the chopping block. So we're going to go to Chris Cillizza now to give his tuppence on this. I'm just going to make sure the playback speed is back to 1 times speed. Okay, let's see what he has to say.
I looked this up. Do you want to know how many? Do you know how many national security advisors Donald Trump had in his first term? 6. He had 6 national security advisors in his first term. I'm going to name them. Mike Flynn. I got him on this piece of paper. Mike Flynn was number 1. Okay, he only made it until February of 2017 before he had to resign because he had not properly disclosed conversations he had before he became National Security Advisor with the Russians. Okay, so that
with the Russians. By the way, if you want to find out, if you want to have a greater understanding of how closely connected Trump has been over time to the Russians, just go and look into Mike Flynn. His National Security Advisor is still part of the Trump world at the moment. He is just a massive loose cannon, but someone who is, I think, in the Russian sphere of influence. And that's who he made his first National Security Advisor in Trump 1.0. It just, a terrible choice. It's just a really, really bad choice. But had to go because he hadn't disclosed talking to the Russians. Who knew?
That was Mike Flynn. Then Keith Kellogg, he was the acting National Security Advisor for a week. Then we went to H.R. McMaster, then John Bolton, then a guy named Charlie Kupperman, he was also acting, and we ended with Robert O'Brien. Now, several of those people, H.R. McMaster and John Bolton, have become pretty prominent critics of Donald Trump, but they were some of the 6 national security advisors. I like to think of National Security Advisor for Donald Trump as akin to the drummer in Spinal Tap. It's a very perilous job. You don't last long. It's like being the manager of the New York Yankees when George Steinbrenner owned the team. You've got a really short shelf life. So weirdly, even though Walt only lasted 3-ish months, 102 days, he lasted longer than Donald Trump's first National Security Advisor in his first term, Mike Flynn, who only lasted until mid-February. So I guess he's got that going for him, which is nice. Okay, so I also want to do a little thing on turnover.
And this is pretty staggering. So the turnover for Trump is double the turnover of the president with the highest turnover previously, which I think is Ronald Reagan in recent history at any rate. It's just incredible. And I think it's reflective of the chaos that is associated with with any Trump administration.
at the senior level in the Trump administration, because it's pretty striking. So a woman named Catherine Dunn Tempest, who works for the Brookings Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, has really done a great job of monitoring sort of, she calls it A-level staff. So this is senior staff. It's cabinet officials, but also one rung below them, but very senior people, and whether they've left, how often they leave past administrations and when they leave. So in the first year of an administration, let me just go through, and this is Donald Trump's first term, obviously not his second term. In his first year, 35%, so more than 1 in 3, 35% of his senior staff turned over. And you say, well, okay, what is that in comparing to past presidents? It's more than double any past president. Let me just go through them. Barack Obama, 9% turnover of his senior staff in his first year. George W. Bush, 6%. Bill Clinton, 11%. George H.W. Bush, 7%. And then Ronald Reagan, in 1981, 17% turnover. But again, that's less than half the 35% turnover that Donald Trump has had. Now, Trump has said many times in his first term, he didn't totally know what he was doing, and he didn't know who he was picking. He wasn't picking the right people, right? That he was picking people that Washington establishment types told him to pick. But now, 2025, he knows everybody, and he's only picking the best people. Well, Mike Waltz is out on May 1st as National Security Advisor. So I don't know how Trump spins this about only the best people, and that he learned his lessons from 2017, and he's not going to make those same mistakes in 2025, because it appears, at least to me, like he's making exactly those same mistakes, at least on National Security Advisor. Although I will say he's got 5 more National Security Advisors to go until he matches the number he had in his first term, which is just a stunning stat. So anyway, Mike Waltz out. I do not think he will be the last cabinet official to go this year. I would circle Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. If there is any other slip up with Hegseth, I think out. So anyway, National Security Advisor out. We'll see who Trump picks. Though I would say, again, it's like being the drummer for Spinal Tap. Like, yes, it's an honor to be the National Security Advisor, but man, if past his prologue, you're not going to be in the job very long.
Okay, and I'd agree with that. So Hegseth, I think, will be next. If anyone, and I say if anyone, past form shows us that there's likely going to be quite some turnover in this administration. And it does make you wonder whether the next person that comes in will be someone even more. Well, actually, you look back at the previous administration, and actually you went from Mike Flynn, who was more of a wingnut loyalist, going to more sensible people. H.R. McMaster and John Bolton in the middle there were fairly sensible. So, yeah, who knows? But I would imagine this time round, you're going to see a real Trump loyalist thrown in there. I think that is, at the moment, the biggest characteristic, the biggest trait that we see running through Trump's administration and those close to him. Is just they are really gunning for outright loyalty to get them through this administration. Let me know what you think, whether there will be a big effect on Ukraine and Ukraine-Russia peace negotiations. I think recently we've seen less of Mike Waltz and more of Steve Witkoff, and actually a little bit more of Keith Kellogg, who had been himself sidelined due to being too pro-Ukrainian. And that was Russia asking Keith Kellogg to be sidelined, and the US kind of agreed to that and sidelined him. But as potentially the US has got a little bit more annoyed with Russia and them dragging their feet and being intransigent, Keith Kellogg might have found himself back in the frame a little bit more. And interestingly, Mike Waltz is out. So, yeah, let me know what dynamics you think that will bring about. In the meantime, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.